40 years old, Kendrick stood in the echoing silence of what was once his life. The last moving truck, a $79.95 U-Haul he hadn't even been allowed to hire, had just pulled away from the curb of the $4.2 million Medina waterfront home, its diesel engine groaning under the weight of his past. All that was left was the scent of lemon-scented cleaner and the faint indentations in the plush, cream-colored carpet where their $12,000 restoration hardware sofa used to be. He was a software architect with a salary of $0, a fresh layoff notice from a tech giant that no longer needed him, and a divorce decree that felt more like a surgical amputation of his entire existence. Sasha stood in the doorway, a vision of untouchable success in a $3,500 Max Mara coat, the camel wool a stark contrast to the gray Seattle drizzle clinging to the air. In her hand, she held a single, sad-looking cardboard box, its flaps bowed inward. The box was from a case of copy paper he'd had in his home office. "This is the last of your hobby stuff," she said, her voice devoid of any emotion other than a chilling finality. She pushed the box into his chest, forcing him to take it. Inside, nestled amongst a tangle of old USB cables and a dusty keyboard, was a hard drive containing the only asset the court had awarded him, a side project, a half-finished data syncing protocol he'd tinkered with on weekends. It was listed in the divorce settlement, an item meticulously documented by her brother Victor, as personal hobby project Synapse. Declared value, $0. Kendrick looked from the box to her face, searching for a flicker of the woman he had married. The woman whose hand he'd held in a small church in the Central District 15 years ago. He found nothing. Her expression was as polished and impenetrable as the glass facade of the downtown skyscrapers. She pulled her keys for the white $72,000 BMW X5 parked in the driveway, the one he had bought for her last birthday, from the pocket of her coat. "Good luck with nothing, Ken," she said, the words clipped and precise. It wasn't a wish. It was a verdict. Then she turned, her $900 Jimmy Choo heels clicking on the imported Italian tile of the foyer, and pulled the heavy oak door shut. The deadbolt slid into place with a sound like a guillotine. Kendrick stood alone in the cavernous, empty house that was no longer his, holding a box of what she considered nothing. He had no job, no savings, no car, and in a few hours, he would have no home. The drizzle outside turned into a downpour, the rain streaking down the panoramic windows that overlooked a turbulent Lake Washington. He had no idea how right she was about one thing, and how devastatingly wrong she was about everything else. Have you ever felt like you've been completely erased from your own life? Tell us in the comments how you found the strength to start over. For Kendrick, the journey was just beginning, and the story of how he turned that box of nothing into everything is one you won't want to miss. The facade of their life had been built with the best materials money could buy. Kendrick remembered the day they closed on the Medina house. It was July, and the sun cast a brilliant, shimmering path across the water. Sasha had squealed, throwing her arms around his neck, her joy so radiant it felt like a physical force. "We did it, Ken. We really did it," she'd said, her voice breathless. His salary at the tech firm had just crossed the $380,000 mark, and the $4.2 million price tag, while daunting, felt like an affirmation of his success, a testament to the years of late nights and sacrificed weekends. Their life became a series of perfectly curated scenes. Dinners on the expansive cedar deck, the grill smoking with $80 cuts of Wagyu beef from the butcher in Bellevue. Sasha would talk about her plans for a kitchen remodel, a $150,000 project involving Italian marble and Sub-Zero appliances. He'd watch their daughter Noah, then just 7, her beautiful black hair a cascade of intricate braids, chasing fireflies on the manicured lawn that sloped down to the private dock. Her laughter was the soundtrack to what he believed was happiness. He drove a reliable 2015 Honda Accord with 95,000 miles on it, content with its practicality. Sasha needed the BMW X5, she'd argued, for safety, for image. Her work as a brand consultant for luxury lifestyle companies required it. In retrospect, her client list was short and her invoices were few, but her social calendar was always full. Lunches at Canley's, charity galas, where a single table cost $5,000, shopping trips to Nordstrom, where she'd return with bags holding a $2,400 Burberry dress or a new $6,000 Chanel handbag. "It's an investment in my network, Ken," she would say, and he, wanting to believe in their shared dream, would nod and approve the transfer from their joint savings. Their vacations were just as meticulously branded. A week at a 5-star resort in Maui cost them $25,000. A weekend trip to a Napa vineyard was another $10,000. He saw it all as the fruits of his labor, the reward for his relentless work ethic. He was a black man who had navigated the treacherous, often isolating corridors of big tech and had come out on top. He wanted his wife and daughter to have the security and comfort he'd never known as a child, growing up in a small rental in Rainier Valley. He didn't realize he wasn't building a family. He was funding a lifestyle. The foundation wasn't love and partnership. It was his annual compensation package. And when that disappeared, the entire structure came crashing down. The layoff came on a Tuesday in October, delivered in a sterile 10-minute Zoom call. His entire division was being eliminated. He was given a severance package of $95,000 and a polite corporate apology. When he told Sasha that evening, her face, usually a mask of serene contentment, hardened into something sharp and unfamiliar. There was no hug, no comforting hand on his arm. "How could you let this happen?" she asked, her voice dangerously quiet. She was standing by the wine fridge, a $4,000 unit, holding a bottle of Chardonnay. "This close to the holidays? What are people going to think?" It was the first crack in the facade, and it was terrifying. His value, he realized with a sickening lurch, was not as a husband or a father, but as a provider, and his service had just been disconnected. Her brother Victor started coming over for dinner. Victor was a divorce attorney with a gleaming smile, a collection of $8,700 Armani suits, and a reputation for being a shark. He'd sit at their $8,000 dining table, swirling a glass of expensive wine, and speak in calm, measured tones about asset protection and financial stability. "With the market so volatile, Sasha," he'd say, looking at Kendrick with a pitying expression, "we need to make sure you and Noah are insulated from any instability." The word hung in the air. Instability. It was now his brand. One evening, Kendrick was trying to work on his resume at his desk when he heard them talking in the kitchen, their voices low. "He's 40, Vic," Sasha whispered. "He's not some hotshot kid anymore. Who's going to hire him for what he was making? We have to be realistic." A week later, he discovered the transfer. He was checking their joint savings account online, planning to move some of the severance to cover their mortgage, and saw a withdrawal for $200,000. The recipient was a new account, in Sasha's name only. When he confronted her, her eyes were cold steel. "It's for Noah's future," she said, not a hint of shame in her voice. "I can't have you gambling it away on some desperate job search. Victor said it was the most responsible thing to do." The cruelty escalated, each act a carefully placed stone building a wall between them. He started spending his days at the Starbucks on Bellevue Way, using their free Wi-Fi to apply for jobs. He felt the sting of humiliation. A former senior architect now nursing a single $4.75 latte for hours just to have a place to work. That was where the process server found him. A man in a cheap suit handed him a thick envelope while he was in the middle of a cover letter. Kendrick Wallace? He opened it right there, the smell of burnt coffee and steamed milk thick in the air. It was a petition for divorce. He read through the pages, his hands trembling. Victor's legal craftsmanship was evident in every line. He was painted as financially reckless, his recent job loss framed not as a misfortune, but as a character flaw. The petition argued that for the sake of Noah's stability, Sasha should be awarded the house, the cars, and the majority of their liquid assets. It was a masterpiece of narrative construction, and he was the villain of the story. The most insulting part was a single line item under the division of assets. Petitioner cedes all claims to respondents' personal computer files, specifically a non-commercial project titled Synapse, which both parties agree has a present and future market value of $0. Victor had made sure to get it in writing. He had made sure that Kendrick was left with, officially and legally, nothing. In the deposition, a cold, formal affair in Victor's glass-walled conference room, Sasha was asked to confirm her assessment of the project. She'd laughed, a short, dismissive sound. "Oh, that? It's just some little computer game he plays with. It's his useless hobby stuff. I just want him to have something." The transcript recorded the moment, freezing her contempt in black and white. She thought she was being magnanimous. She had no idea she was handing him the key to his own salvation. The 400-square-foot studio apartment in Beacon Hill was a world away from the sprawling luxury of Medina. The rent was $950 a month, a figure that felt both impossibly high and mercifully low. The view wasn't of a shimmering lake, but of a brick wall and a perpetually damp alley. He bought a $200 futon from Amazon that served as both his couch and his bed. His kitchen was a hot plate and a mini fridge that hummed a constant mournful tune. For the first few weeks, the silence was the loudest thing in the room. It was the sound of his life being hollowed out. The first weekend he was supposed to have Noah, he was sick with anxiety. He'd cleaned the tiny apartment 3 times, bought her favorite snacks, Annie's organic cheddar bunnies, and set up a small crafting station on his fold-out table. Sasha was supposed to drop her off at noon. At 12:30, he started to pace. At 1, he called. It went straight to voicemail. At 1:15, the white BMW X5 finally pulled up to the curb. Sasha didn't get out. She just honked. Noah, her small backpack clutched in her hands, ran to the door of the old apartment building. She looked small and lost against the backdrop of peeling paint and concrete stairs. He knelt and hugged her, burying his face in her hair, which smelled of coconut and shea butter. He could feel Sasha's eyes on them from the car, a silent, judgmental gaze. That night, after they'd eaten macaroni and cheese cooked on the hot plate and read 2 chapters of a Harry Potter book, he tucked her into a sleeping bag on the futon. He lay awake for hours, on an air mattress on the floor, listening to the unfamiliar city sounds and the soft rhythm of his daughter's breathing. He felt like a complete and utter failure. The next morning, after Sasha had picked her up with another impatient honk, he was cleaning up and found a folded piece of construction paper on the floor by the door. She must have slid it underneath before she left. He unfolded it carefully. It was a drawing, rendered in the earnest, slightly clumsy lines of a 9-year-old. On the left was a tall figure with short, coily hair labeled Dad. On the right was a smaller figure with long, beautiful braids labeled Me. They were holding hands. At the bottom, in big, careful letters, she had written, "We can start over, Dad." He sank onto the futon, the drawing clutched in his hand. He looked closely at the figures. She had used a brown crayon, a deep, rich shade, to color in their skin. She had drawn them as they were, a black father and his black daughter together. In that simple, powerful drawing, she had given him back his identity. He wasn't just a failed architect or a broke divorcee. He was her dad, and they could start over. He taped the drawing to the wall above his futon, where it became the first and only piece of art in the room. It was his anchor. The weekend handoffs became a ritual of quiet humiliation. Sasha would arrive in the gleaming BMW, always dressed in something new and expensive. She'd look at his worn $89 Timex watch, the one he'd had since college, with a flicker of pity and disgust. Once, she handed him the child support check. A cruel legal maneuver by Victor had him paying her $1,200 a month based on an imputed income from his last job, even though he was barely making ends meet with freelance coding gigs. "Make sure you spend it on her," she'd said, her tone suggesting he might use it for himself. "I do," he'd replied, his voice a flat, calm mask that betrayed none of the rage churning inside him. In the long, quiet hours between Noah's visits and his desperate search for a full-time job, he turned to the box, to the nothing. He set up his old computer, plugged in the hard drive, and opened the files for Project Synapse. It was a data syncing protocol he'd been designing, an elegant solution to a complex problem of moving massive data sets between disparate cloud environments securely and efficiently. He'd done it for fun, as a mental exercise. Now it became his sanctuary. He would lose himself in the clean, logical world of code. Each line he wrote was a brick he could lay, a small piece of order in a life defined by chaos. He wasn't thinking about money or success. He was just building. He was proving to himself that he could still create something solid and functional, even as the world he once knew lay in ruins around him. He had no idea he was rebuilding his entire future, one line of code at a time. 14 months crawled by. Life settled into a grueling rhythm. Kendrick landed a long-term contract position, making $65 an hour. It wasn't the $380,000 salary he was used to, but it was enough. Enough for the $950 rent, the $1,200 child support payment that felt like extortion, groceries from the local Safeway, and art supplies for Noah's weekend visits. They had a routine now. Friday night was homemade pizza on the floor. Saturday was for exploring the Museum of Flight or building elaborate Lego creations that took over the entire studio. He was poor in assets, but rich in time with his daughter. He was beginning to think this might be it, his new, smaller life. He was learning to be content with it. It was a Tuesday morning, November 12th, at 9:17 a.m. The Seattle sky was its signature shade of iron gray. Rain pattered against the single window of his studio. He was drinking coffee brewed in a $25 Mr. Coffee machine, the bitter taste a familiar start to his day. He was logged into his work portal, about to start debugging a particularly nasty piece of code for his contract job, when he decided to check his personal email first. He clicked through the usual junk. A 20% off coupon from Old Navy, a political fundraising plea, a notification that his credit score had dropped another 3 points. He was about to close the tab when a subject line caught his eye. It was from an address he didn't recognize. Subject: inquiry regarding your Synapse code repository. His first thought was that it was a phishing scam, some elaborate attempt to get his credentials. But his name was spelled correctly. The sender's name was David Chen, and his title was listed as VP of Business Development at Stratosphere Cloud Services, one of the biggest players in the industry. Curiosity piqued, he clicked it open. The email was short, professional, and shockingly direct. Dear Mr. Wallace, my team came across a public repository for a project you authored called Synapse. The architectural design for the data syncing protocol is exceptionally elegant. We believe it may offer a unique solution to a challenge we are currently facing. I would like to schedule a brief, confidential call to discuss your work and explore potential synergies. Please let me know what time works best for you this week. Sincerely,